Good morning. I'm John Rickrick, Vice President of the South Dakota Art Museum Guild, and I would like to welcome all Guild members and non-members to the fourth virtual program of 2020 and 2021. And before anything, I'd like to thank Carolyn Hart from the museum, who is our technical director as far as this Zoom program. But today we are really privileged to have sculptor and South Dakota Artist Laureate Dale Lamphere from his studio in Sturgis, South Dakota. Dale is not only a well-known sculptor and mentor to young sculptors, but an art activist. He's been a member of the South Dakota Arts Council appointed by Governor Nicholson in 1989 and is currently president of Arts South Dakota, the nonprofit, nonpartisan organization with the purpose of enriching the lives of South Dakotans and their visitors by advancing the arts through service, education, and advocacy. Now I'm really privileged to introduce my friend Dale Lamphere.
Well, thank you, John. I appreciate that. I'm honored to have this opportunity to share my studio and my projects with a wider audience. To give you an overview of the program that we have today, the first thing that you'll see is a video done by Randall Iverson, sponsored by the Dahl Arts Center. That'll take up about 15 minutes or so. Then I'll give you a tour of my studio and show you the recent projects and some of those that are in progress and others that are pending. Then at the very end, we'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have. So welcome and enjoy the program. I'm certain I will.
I always want to say, let's not forget that absolutely the most important thing that a society can do is have a creative edge, so it's got an expressive edge to itself. I mean, everything else, while important, is just maintenance. We need to keep growing as a society, and that takes some creativity. My father was in World War II, Army Air Corps. He had his bachelor's in agriculture and range management from the University of Wyoming, and he went on and got a master's degree. So the Department of Education had an experimental program they called nursery school. I can remember real specific things about it. And the one that stands out in my mind, I remember the day they brought clay into the room and we started to play with it. I remember how the sun came in the windows and where I was sitting, things like that, that as I look back, I can see how big an impression that made on me. I mean, to get my hands into something like that, that was kind of my earliest memory of creating something. When I was quite young, we lived up in Harding County, 16 miles west of Buffalo. And then we came down to Sturgis and eventually moved out east of Sturgis on a ranch in the Bear Butte Valley area. I think the most important thing was just the work ethic, to get up every morning and realize that what you did that day is going to have a big influence on the immediate environment that you're in, and do something, get something accomplished. And that drive to do that has carried me through all these 50 years of being an artist. I went to the University of Wyoming as well, and I had an opportunity to go on board a shipboard program that still exists. And at that point, I got on board a ship in January, LA, and about 5 months later landed in New York, having visited 18 different countries and 23 different ports, every one university, major museums, and I saw all these things that had been created by these cultures that recorded the values and the character of that society. And I realized when I saw that creating objects that reflected those qualities in a culture was a worthwhile endeavor, and that those items were regarded with respect and that they were preserved. And I thought, well, that's a worthy way to spend my time. And then I came back, and that was in 1967, and by 68, well, I had declared myself an artist and didn't look back. People ask me, how'd you become successful? How do you do that? And I say, well, the first thing you have to get accustomed to, and it was my experience as well, is 15 years of abject poverty. We lived in the country, we had a milk cow, we had chickens, I bartered for groceries. I remember going to the grocery store with one of my wood assemblages and trading it for credit. Those kinds of things helped me get by, but it was a struggle, for a long time. I have the feeling that I never really worked for money. I worked to do an excellent job, and sometimes I made money and sometimes I didn't. But by doing a good job, then you get to move forward to the next opportunity. Well, I took very little in terms of art training. I did, as I got into it, I went to workshops and went to the foundry and interacted with other artists. I've done some painting, but the kind of work that I enjoy is the hands-on, soft clay or stone or metal or the shaping of objects. And when I started with things that I knew. I grew up in a Western environment, so it was wagons and windmills, and then I started to add landscape with that, made out of leathers and canvas and various things, and eventually the landscape became more interesting to me than the objects in front. I definitely have raised my hand and then realized I was over my head, but I didn't back out of it. I hustled and paid attention and did a learning curve that was required to get the thing done. It just has gone on like that, one serendipitous event after another. The course of my career has been real diverse. I've done everything from assemblage to landscape-related works to classic figurative pieces to complete abstractions. There are common threads that run through it all, and part of it is the sort of lyric line that I see in the mountain and prairie intersection where I live, and there's a sense of scale that has come from where I live. I try to respond to my environment always, and have something that is coming from what I really am fascinated by. I've always thought that artistic license is about the license to keep growing, to keep innovating. I've never quite understood doing the same thing over and over. I remember having a fellow that was involved with business one time say, boy, if you just stick with what you know, as soon as you figure out what you're doing, you move on to something else. And it's true, I've done that. But that's artistic license for me. Well, the first life-size piece I did was Blue Stem Woman that's in the Rapid City Public Library, and it's mostly found objects. I mean, there's a couple of cast elements to it, but it was a piece of tin that had tumbled around on the prairie, and that's what was the given that was the point of origin for the piece, because it looked like a skirt and kind of blowing in the wind, and I used that into the shape that it had to key into this life-size figure. And I never pick things up unless I have some kind of vision when I do it, because I don't feel like I ought to disturb everything and just on the chance that I'll come up with an idea. But I have probably 100 rocks out back that at one point I knew just exactly what I was going to do with those. And some of them, the vision still holds. I mean, I've always had a greater talent for nonlinear thinking than I have for linear thinking, but I think it's been a real asset to me as I sculpt the human form, particularly because you have to drive all your horses at the same time. You can't work on an eye and get it all done and then find, oh, gee, it's a half inch too low. You have to dance around the figure and do everything a little bit all over. And I would work here on one part and something would catch my eye, and then I'd go work on that, and I'll go over there and do that. And so I was constantly dancing around the figure, moving all parts of it at the same time. So I want to say that for people that have some special ability to think in this nonlinear fashion, I mean, think of it in part as an asset, because it can be that. There are over 1,000 pieces in Dignity. We cut them out by hand with a plasma cutter and fitted them back together like a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. First time that I'd ever fabricated a face out of stainless steel. And I was awfully glad for years of experience in doing literally hundreds of human faces. I try as much as possible to solve my problems on a small scale, because I know once I'm committed to a certain path, there I go. I always leave some aspects of it open, because I know that with this change of scale from a little maquette to 50 foot, there are going to be things that change, and I make those decisions when I get there. There are so many things that I can't understand completely until I get to see it at that point in the process, and then I can make an adjustment. Well, I have to say that, I mean, of all the works I've done, I think I've gotten more feedback of a positive sort from Dignity than anything else I've done. And part of it is just the visibility of it, to be sure. I didn't know how it would be received by the native communities, and it seems to have been accepted in a good way. It's been a wonderful experience for me. I mean, it's a kind of highlight at 50 years into my career. Well, I have always hired people that are better welders than I am. I can tack things together a little bit, but that's about as far as I go, because so much of these big pieces particularly require hours and hours of just running a bead of weld. And there are fellows that are far better at that than I am, because somebody has to stand back and look and point their finger, and holler at people. And I tell them they have no idea how difficult it is to stand down here and yell all day. For me, creating, I think, is so much about what I feel at that given moment, and that's why I think it's so important to keep my attention cleaned up so I can perceive those things and grasp those opportunities. I know that what drives me forward in part is that every piece I've ever done, there's always something I come back and look and think, oh, how did I miss that? I so wish I could have understood that better, but consciousness being what it is, you do the best you can given that point in your understanding, and then later on maybe you understand more and realize that that didn't work so well. But it keeps pushing me on because I keep wanting to get it right the next time. Well, at this point in time, I mean, Arc of Dreams is certainly the largest and in some ways the most ambitious and arguably the most expensive piece I've ever done. And I think I probably won't do anything quite of this scale again. I think that I would like to work on projects that I can do here in my studio. I started out again by drawing, and this case it was very much a gestural drawing, and I swept that arc that went over the river, I swept that into a tail or a canopy out on each side so that there'd be a space for visitors underneath, and decided that that break in the middle was really important because you could have a dream or an idea in your consciousness and you could take it a certain distance, but at some point it always requires that you trust yourself in the future and take that leap of faith in order to complete the dream. I mean, all of us have a certain period of time that we get to act out and make manifest our visions of how life could be or what art should be about, and then we gradually play out and finish our statement, and somebody has to come and take over. So never doubt that you can be that next person to be successful in the arts. Well, I believe we're back. So welcome back. I thought that Randall Iverson did a wonderful job of kind of summing up some of my thoughts and certainly some of my career. If somehow I am not fully online here at this point, somebody please let me know or give me some kind of indication.
No, you're good. We see you and
Are we
we
good?
can hear you just fine.
Okay, good. Well, what I'd like to do at this point is just pan around the studio here and give you an overview, and then I'll go back and talk about specific projects. You know, that I think would be an interesting aspect for everybody. So I'll reverse this and we'll just go around the studio. No, apparently that didn't work. There we go. Well, there's my well-organized desk and a work that some of you might recognize from the governor's show. But this is just my environment on a day-to-day basis. And I am so honored and pleased to have such a wonderful space. I have a nice big skylight overhead that gives me good light in all conditions. And you can see remnants of a lot of past projects. You know, the money is gone, the piece is gone, and all I have left are these clays and models and various things. So these are some of the things that are, there's a project that's coming up. And then I have a lot of little models that represent studies for larger works, and most of them came to fruition. But I try always to just play with the clay and look for forms and ideas that make sense and that have beauty to them and a kind of wholeness of message. So at any rate, this is my space here. A lot of you have no doubt heard about the land issues here in Rapid City where Susan is located. And of course, there was a boarding school there at one time, and over 50 children passed away while they were attending this boarding school. In some cases, the parents didn't even know about it until months later. The children were buried rather unceremoniously in locations that are now lost. But there is a move afoot to honor these children, and this is a study for a piece that I'm working on. It would be a little over life size, and it involves, let me move the light a little, maybe we can get it a little more visible. There we go. It's a family grouping, and I'm consulting with some elders to make certain that what I've got going is culturally appropriate and that it will work. But you know, I wanted something that would show family. They're organized as in the 4 directions, and these would be animals would be along the base. But this is just a little study. You can kind of see how small it is. There's my, you know, I'm working, I can barely see the faces at this point in my life. I have a good pair of glasses. So another project that we're working on, and this just recently came together, that would be this. It is for Black Hills State University, and you can see the little scale person on the side representing a 6-foot person, and it's in a roundabout that's being developed just before you go up the hill to the level of the university. And what I have done is study the structure of a hive and create the home of the yellow jackets in that sense, and yet it's also a kind of beautiful sculptural object. You can tell by my rather crude movements that I'm not a professional photographer by any means. But this would be entirely stainless steel. I have the colors of the school there, the green and the gold. Initially, they came to me and were thinking of sculpting the yellow jacket. And of course, I really wasn't willing to do that and wanted something a little more universal, a little more iconic. And then this is where we wound up. So that's a project. One that one of the participants here today is Dustin Twiss, and he is part of a project that I'm doing with Monument Health, the hospital system here in Rapid City that recently affiliated with the Mayo Clinic. And this is the maquette or model for that piece. And there's the scale on that. You can see it's almost 30 foot tall and about 14 foot wide. And there are 54 diamonds projecting at different elevations from the wall. And on 20 of those diamonds will be the artwork of 20 members of the community, artists, artisans, hobbyists. We had over 100 submittals for the project. We paid each person who submitted an idea. Some of them looked like they had just come off the refrigerator, but we paid everybody $100. And then those who are selected, the 20 finalists, will receive $2,000. And we're well into this project. This was on the studio floor here just until recently, and we picked it up. It took up pretty much the entire floor space. So we were, but we've got the substrate built. The next thing is to attach the metal and the artwork, and we figured out our hanging mechanism. And you know, it's quite again, all these projects get to be a bit complicated, but that's the nature of it. You know, a past project that happened, this is just a collection of works that I have done for my own amusement and pleasure. And I do hate to part with them because I have a real love for some of them. Beautiful amethyst pieces are always attractive to me. I look at them as a given. I mean, any stone is that way. I mean, it's a starting point for an object, for a creation. Some of them are quite humble stones, but wind up in a beautiful setting. Just very simple. This is a work that we did a couple years back in Snowmass, Colorado, and it's in a roundabout. As you can see, that construction going on there. And then here is the maquette for that. It was 23 foot tall, and these were big rocks that were quite a task to get them to kind of be a part of the support of the piece, but it worked out well. We do work with structural engineering firm Albertson here in Rapid. They're quite excellent at what they do. They did the structural design for Dignity and for the Arc of Dreams. And my understanding is that the architect I worked with won Architect of the Year for that particular work. Here's an example of doing my study on a small scale. This is about 1.5 feet long. And then I went to this scale to really define it. And the work wound up 64 feet long. It is a landscape of South Dakota. There we get to where so all of these things are just studies and maquettes and finished works and bits and pieces of my career. This was a study for a 27 foot tall piece that went into, well, it's in Omaha, Nebraska. It was done for the Archdiocese of Omaha, the Resurrection. And this is a study for the Queen of Peace, which is a 30 foot tall piece that is in Sioux City, Iowa. This is a remnant of clay here that turned into a stone sculpture, Kateri Tekakwitha, that's at the Basilica of the National Shrine in Washington, D.C. That was one of the few stone pieces that I did. But I worked it out in clay first to be sure. Portrait of Burl Ives, the Spirit of Healing, Citadel, just remnants of all kinds of pieces here. Another work that we're just about to go into the final form on it, which will be a 7-foot bronze piece, is Pope John Paul II. This is just a little 2-foot maquette of the piece, and this is in plaster here. These are all of the community tapestry pieces. We've applied a hanger on the back side of them, and we've just put them here to get them out of our way. Here's a piece that I want to keep just because I love it so much. It's called Clovis Point. It's just a stone and stainless steel piece. It reflects that kind of napped appearance that stone points have. And I have a clay of the work that is kind of tying on the eagle plume or the Hukayapi ceremony. I do love faces and expression, and then as I swing around here, there you'll see other faces on a larger scale, and St. Francis piece. This is a very early assemblage, and it was the maquette for it. So the final one was 12 foot. Oh, this is something my wife gave me for my birthday one year. You don't get a retirement program or a laurel wreath or any of that stuff for being South Dakota Artist Laureate. So she, in jest, did this for me. And these are just collections of past objects, some of them maquettes for pieces. The studio is a complex of rooms, and I always joke that I either had to clean or add on, and it was just so much easier to add on. So you'll recognize some of the works that are in the Capitol. These are some things that I do just again for pleasure, and sometimes they wind up being awards. I've worked with the foundation, the SDSU Foundation, for quite a number of years. This is a little model of the Hope Chapel that I did out in Washington, D.C. at the Basilica of the National Shrine. This just shows you kind of the precise approach. And I have it so that I can take things apart and measure them. And it's, I'm not a trained architect or anything, but whoops, I'm a little shaky here on this stuff. But this gives you some idea of my approach to creating these things. I make these small models and try to make them to scale, real precise. I do think it's a good way to communicate with clients as well. So I think those are the the main projects that I've kind of covered, the community tapestry, the hive for the Black Hills State University, and then the piece that will honor the deceased children from the boarding school. I do have a big collection of books that I study through. Some of my anatomy books are tattered to the point of falling apart because I really had to research. I feel like I'm sort of a cracked vessel in that I put information in and it drains out so quickly, and I have to constantly review. Here's some other little study pieces and maquettes. Here's again that Pope. So that's kind of a tour of the studio and the projects. If there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Yeah, we've had quite a few questions in the chat area, so maybe I'll begin there, and people are welcome to add more to the chat as we go.
Okay.
But yeah, so the first question came in from Prudence, and she was wondering how much of your work is private projects versus public projects.
Oh, I'd say the split is about 50-50. I've had some people ask how I could stand to do so much commission work, and my attitude is that it's very much like if you have a 5-gallon bucket of water and you just pour it out on flat ground, well, it just diffuses and soaks in and doesn't have a great amount of effect. But if you dig a little bit of a channel and pour it in that, well, it travels further and it cuts deeper, and that's how I look at a commission, is that the parameters that I'm given focus my efforts in a specific direction, and it allows me to eliminate all the multiple possibilities if I'm just creating strictly for myself. I always take it in the direction that I want and need and try to get as much freedom as possible. And clients are generally real open to that. I mean, if I can present a vision to them, particularly in the form of a drawing or model that is inspiring, well, they'll go with me on that. So it's never been a real problem.
Lynette is wondering, what was your first piece of art to be displayed publicly, and where is it located?
Oh, well, back when I was doing assemblages, these kind of recreations of wagons and buildings and things that were familiar to me in my environment. I did a series that went into a restaurant that was in St. Ange. They were famous for their steak tips. So at any rate, those works are still, I think, in some law office somewhere, because they were buildings that were familiar to people in this immediate area. Yeah, well, Blue Stem Woman is one of the early pieces that I did. I guess I have to think back. Yeah, that's the assemblage works, and then Blue Stem Woman. Those were all back in the early 70s. So, yeah, when I look back, and I'm a little amazed at all the things that I've done, but it's just been a steady process. I mean, I always like to stay busy, and I like to get up in the morning and go to it. So a lot of things get done.
Well, Lynette also asked, do you have engineering training as well as art training? And she's also wondering when the Black Hill College sculpture will be installed. This is an aside.
Well, I took a few, I went to Black Hills for a while, and I took a few art courses, but I never dreamed that that's where I was going. It was really the journey around the world that changed my paradigm. And the Black Hills State work will be going in before school starts next fall.
All right. Jody is wondering, do you work fluidly between figuration and abstraction?
Yeah, I like to go back and forth. I mean, to me, it's about formal qualities. It's about movement and balance and mass, and it's about creating a beautiful object in space. And whether it's a human form or an abstract form, it seems to me that the same basic principles apply. Human form, of course, demands knowledge of anatomy in order to be convincing, and it's a bottomless study, I gotta say. I mean, once you learn one aspect about it, there's definitely a level that's deeper than what you know, and so it's a constant study and direct observation of nature, both for abstract works and for figurative works, I think is essential.
Angie is wondering, what kind of clay do you work with for your maquettes?
Oh, I use oil-based plastiline. It's not a water-based generally. I've done a few pieces that way, but the clay, oil-based clays, give you the opportunity to play with it for a much longer time with less difficulty of keeping it moist. The terracotta clays, though, they're interesting, and you have to really stay with it. And that provides a kind of discipline.
All right. Jean is wondering, which historical artists do you admire?
Oh, I mean, the list is kind of long. I mean, I certainly like the vitality of Rodin's work, the way he gets light to come off the surface. As for abstract works, a fellow named Dmitri Hadzi was a favorite of mine. I just liked his sense of balance and mass. I admire all, like Gutzon Borglum even. I mean, he certainly was a classically trained artist. I think that if you're going to do figurative art, you better either have some real solid training or get it yourself, do it yourself. I mean, you can get books and look at nature, do human studies and figure it out. That's what the classic method is really all about, is that observation of nature and thorough understanding. I mean, my favorite things in the human form are hands and faces, and it's just because I've done enough to where I kind of understand the substructure. And I can show you one of the study pieces that I've done. Let me reverse my camera here. And this is an example of what it takes, I think, to really get an understanding. This is a skull that I sculpted, and on this side, here's all of the musculature laid in. And so this, to me, is really clears up all of the question marks about where are the bones and what are the muscles doing and what are we looking at. And so that kind of thing, I think, is real worthwhile.
Patty is wondering, how many projects do you find yourself working on at a given time?
Well, I say I'm, I guess, a little omnivorous. I like to keep, 2 or 3 or 4 kind of happening all the time, in part because these bigger projects, particularly, there's always a lull at some point. You know, there's always, you're waiting for materials, or you're waiting, in this case, like community tapestry. Well, I'm waiting in February 1st, all of the artists are supposed to have their final commissions completed so that I can weave them into the tapestry. And until I get them, I can't really move forward on that. So I've been working on the hive and on this small maquette for the boarding school, and then we'll be getting metal back for this Pope John Paul II, which will be 7 foot tall. I mean, we'll be getting that back here before Christmas. So we'll be able to really go after that particular piece. And that'll be done, you know, in probably a month and a half. And then we'll be about at the point where we'll be getting work for the tapestry.
And when you refer to we, tell us more about who you work with and how that works. I'm interested to know.
Well, here again, I can show you some pictures. I have one fellow that works here full time, and I always introduce him. His name is Andy Rolchin, but I introduce him as the reason we get things done. Yeah, because he's really a good fellow and a hard worker, and he and I have worked together now for I think 16 years, something like that. So, you know, we have our communications really worked out at this point. I have another fellow that I worked with for 30 years, and he's now not able to continue. Let me turn my camera again. And this is when we were doing the dignity piece, and Andy is the person on the right. And you might recognize Grant Standard. He had a foundry up in Hill City. And then the fellow in the middle, that's the guy I worked with for 30 years. And he's the reason I was able to do these large scale pieces. What you're looking at behind them is a shoulder and an upper arm of dignity. So really, I just have one person full time, and when we get going on a project where we need more, I hire more. And when I say we, I guess I refer also to my wife, who is involved in this and the business end of it. There we are building again. Here are her moccasins. They're about 8 foot long, 9 foot long, something like that. And just to move along and show you a little more of this, here is the armature, the basic armature. It's a tripod with a compression box in the middle, just like the hub on an umbrella that's been turned on its side. So it's a real elegant engineering solution and tremendously strong. This is Andrew inside of one of the shoulder sections. And here is Grant. We had the moccasins and leggings temporarily attached at this point. And then here's the maquette, the model that I did of that. And there's the figure that shows the human scale. I have to say, I was a little intimidated when I got this model done and made a figure to scale. If you'd like, I could give you a tour of the rest of the studio and show you some of our kind of workspaces. This is my creative space that we've been exploring here. But we've got messier spots.
Well, and
would you like to do that?
Sure, and we have some questions. Maybe as you're walking around, you can address.
Sure, sure, that'd be fine.
Yeah, Lynette was wondering if you have installations in other countries.
very few, let's put it that way, very few. I have some work in Japan, and you know, really that's about it. That's about it. I've got work in, I think, 22 different states, but nothing really overseas.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to switch the camera back. I'll just pan this room. It's a little shocking, actually. So this is a room where we do, where you can see now, here's one of the little Pope pieces just in metal, and we're getting ready to do a patina on it. You know, we have all of this. So this is our welder is normally in here, but it is currently in the next room, which is a rough shop. And we'll go out there just momentarily.
Yeah, and a couple people have asked, I know you mentioned that we might have missed where the Pope is going to be installed.
That is going to Sioux City, Iowa, to an organization called Trinity Heights. So this is our rough shop, and outside this big door is a work area with a 22-foot overhead. Well, we're this far. Let's go ahead. This is our outdoor work area. And here you can see this overhead beam with a power hoist, electric hoist that can lift 2 tons. Here are some of our central armature pipes for the hive piece for Black Hills State. Here's a piece of granite in waiting. That's pretty sizable, and my big collection of stone and all wraps around the building. But it is a wonderful environment. I'm about to build a tower, which is a really unnecessary thing, but I always wanted one, and so then I've got most of. You can see how this is a virtual debris field here, but we get a lot of work done that way. Okay, we'll go back in.
While you're walking, Angela was wondering about the community tapestry project. She wanted to know, how are the images in the community tapestry accomplished on metal substrate?
Well, they're working on whatever format they want in terms of, like, we have such a nice diversity. I mean, we have beadwork and painting and a quilt and some stone pieces, and you know, I mean, they're really a broad variety of it. This is a start of an idea for an arbor, but just to show you a few of the community tapestry pieces. Here's one. They'll all be on this bias of being a diamond. This is one that reflects the Scandinavian heritage that we have. This one will be a true tapestry with metallic gold thread and white silk. This is one that is just a beautifully drawn demonstration of compassion and guidance. you know, I tried to pick things that have some sort of story to tell. This is one that is made out of undyed woods. These are, you know, yellow pine, redwood, ebony, but kind of a wood inlay sort of thing. So, I mean, real broad spectrum. Here's one that will be a quilt. You know, so there's just a fascinating array of things that will be there. This is something that, this is a bas relief portrait of Mary Somerville that some of you might be familiar with. This is the clay original here, but very, very shallow relief, just very shallow. You know, barely any projection at all. They're quite challenging to do. Okay, I will go on through here, and I will show you the office. This is the wood shop here in between. I'm not going to show you that. That's just a little too messy. You can tell that my standards are low. These are finished pieces. Here's that queen piece that you saw the model of, and there you can see me standing at the bottom of it. But this is my office then. You know, as I always joke, I struggle along as best as I can here. You know, I feel like everything is so, I mean, it's so luxurious in so many ways. Here is that resurrection piece. There's a lot of reflection, but you get the idea.
It really shows the scale.
Yeah, yeah, you can really see that it's considerable. And that was all clay, and we cast it in stainless steel. It took about 1.5 years, and at the time it was one of the largest stainless steel castings in the country. This, we're getting a lot of reflection here. Well, this is that Hope Chapel that I showed you. And then here's, you know, working on some balustrades. And then here it is in the real location. And then here is the finished piece with well, that's just hard to get past that. And then here is the church where it's located. It's the Basilica of the National Shrine and Parent Church for Catholicism. I'm a good Methodist boy, but somehow I got in with these Catholics, and I've met some very nice people. Here's the marble carving of Kateri Tekakwitha. She became the first Native American saint.
Beautiful. You know, we are rounding the hour. We've got a couple more questions on the chat, and I'll make sure that you get those by email so that you could respond to folks.
Okay, very good, very good. And one last thing I want to show you is a little bit about the environment here. This is a deck just outside my office. You can see we've had some snow, but this is the beautiful view, and you know, off into the distance, and there's Bear Butte. I don't know, I guess you can't really see it through the trees here, or it doesn't seem to show up on camera. But, you know, it's just a wonderful environment in which to live and work. And my commute is about 100 yards from my house, which is off to the south here. So I feel very fortunate.
Well, we feel really fortunate to have gotten this behind the scenes view into what you do and just learning more about your work. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, you're certainly
Thank you so much, Dale. We really appreciate you taking your time to prepare and present the great informative program. You know, you've enriched the lives of South Dakotans and its visitors through your art, especially your public art. Guild members were in awe of dignity during our visit to Chamberlain about 3 years ago. And of course, the Arc of Dreams, which has become a destination in Sioux Falls. If you haven't seen these pieces, they're a must. Again, thank you, Dale, and thanks for all you do, and thanks everyone for tuning in to today's program. We really appreciate it. Again, thank you,
thank
Dale.
you. Yes, well,
And,
thank you for the
it's been great. Our next virtual program will be January 26th of 2021. Can you believe it? We hope and pray that 2021 is much better than the current year. We will welcome Molly Wicks, who's an artist and a lecturer in SDSU's School of Design. Molly will share her work with us, and her program is entitled Green is My Favorite Color. And she's a very interesting person. It'll be really give a good program.